In this how-to digital training session, we aim to empower groups to explore the digital landscape and discover the best ways to meet their needs. As it looks with coronavirus, we are going up the tiers, unfortunately, so skills like this are ever more important in keeping that face-to-face interaction with your groups. And it's important that you learn to best utilize all the tools that you have, and lots of them for free, so that you can run interactive and interesting and important sessions for your groups, but it depends on what you're using your video calling platform for. So just quickly, the benefits of video calling, I'm sure we all know, but video calling, just like a regular phone call, is just like a regular phone call, except you see the person that you're calling on the screen and they can see you. This is an extremely useful tool. Being able to see someone's facial expressions and emotions takes a digital conversation to a deeper level of connection and interaction. And as we're going into times of isolation and stuff like that, seeing people and talking to people is really, really important, just for keeping morale high and just for a bit of distraction when you're in your house on your own all day. So we'll be looking at today more of an overview of etiquette and how to look after a group. We will go through how to set up an actual group meeting, but we'll do that fairly quickly as we're looking at how to interact with a group online and advice and problems that you could run into. So first we'll start with the start of a group call or before a group video call. So before you begin a video meeting, it's important to manage expectations of the session. Making the format, and I put rules in quotation marks because they're not set in stone rules, but having rules and a format that you'll follow makes the meeting clear to the participants, and it makes it easier for people to understand what's going on and when they should talk and how they should interact in a digital space. So at the start of and before a group video meeting, it's important to introduce yourself. Even if you know the people that you're video calling with, you establish yourself as the host at the start. You introduce yourself, and then you can go on to introduce the purpose and the aims of the group. So then people know what they're doing. If there's a bit of confusion, they know why they're there and who they're listening to, and how they're going to interact with the host. So like, this is a webinar format. I introduce myself and what we're doing, and it makes it very clear that this is sort of, we're going to go through content and there'll be time for questions at the end. So adding to the purpose and aims, setting what you hope participants will gain and learn from your session is a great way for people to absorb what you're doing. So if you set goals and targets and people know what they're going to gain, they're more likely to listen out for that information and understand what they're there to communicate. So if it's like a conversation, you're trying to gain insight, and then they'll be listening out for insights. So it just helps the session run smoother, and it helps fulfill the aims of the session. So another important thing, let everyone know the format of the meeting. I know you probably have done this in the invite to the session, but it just makes sure that people know that there's going to be a break at some point, so they can go to the toilet, they can do this and that if you're in a long session, or it lets people know when they'll have a chance to ask questions. Like ours is 45 minutes and 50-minute Q&A. It just keeps the clarity and the structure intact. And another great idea in a group session is, once you've done your introduction, your aims, you've run through all the structure, asking people if they have any questions before you start. You can put questions. You could ask people to put questions in the chat. That's a good way to do it, so that people can respond. Or if you're in a meeting where people's mics are unmuted, you just ask if everyone's okay, everyone's happy, all the mics are working, because there can be a whole host of digital problems that go wrong. But that's just a great way to make sure that everyone's happy with the structure before you move on. So, housekeeping. I'm going to see if this will skip the words. Yeah. So I'm just going to keep that at the bottom of the page. But the housekeeping aspect is explaining how you and your group will interact with the video call features. So you can explain when participants should be using the chat and when they should be using the Q&A features. That's a good way to establish clear communication channels and section the communication so people aren't putting in the Q&A, oh, my mic's not working, or I can't hear you, I can't see you. Another important thing is how the host will respond to questions. So like I tried to do in the start, I said I will respond to the Q&A questions in the last 15 minutes. I didn't mention, which is poor housekeeping on my part, but I didn't mention I will respond verbally. But if you would like me to respond by typing, I can do that, just put it in your question. So that's another good way. Or you can tell people if they type a question in the chat, you'll respond verbally, or you will respond in the chat. You just want to do it so it least disrupts your video call or your meeting. Confirm the start of any recording. You should let participants know that they're going to be recorded, especially if they have their audio or video on. I think it's just good practice to do it even when you can't see other people, just so that you don't start recording people without their consent. It's really important to have the consent. Also, you can explain that participants should be muted so that they can take it in turns to speak. This is a really good way to make sure that the audio is clearer for everybody involved, and that it's courteous. When you're in a video call, you need to allow other people to speak individually so that it doesn't turn into a really noisy, unorganized conversation. I think in digital space, it does need to be quite strict with people having their mics on and off at specific times. You can also use the raise your hand feature. I've called it that, but in Zoom, it's just called reactions. So you have little emoji, sort of emoticon images, and you could, at the start of your meeting, say that this is what you're going to use to digitally raise your hand that you'd like to speak. And that is a really good way because it pops up in the top left-hand corner of someone's video or someone's video picture. So it would allow everyone to know that this person would like to speak, and then the host could ask them to unmute their mic and contribute what they wish to contribute. So they're just some things that I would talk about, use as prompts in your introduction if you're making your own group video call. Okay, so the next one that we'll look at is during a group video call, sorts of stuff that you'll need to acknowledge and consider. So it's important to consider how you will use various video calling functions to influence your meeting. Obviously, it depends on what the aim of your meeting is. Like this webinar is going to be very different to a small 4-person meeting conversation. So just bear in mind that not all of it applies to every kind of meeting. So, as we said in the introduction, it's important to announce how you're going to respond to questions. And during the video call, responding to chat/questions, the things I suggested were having reactions to digitally put your hand up so that you could ask a question and then you could verbally respond to that, or you could have people put questions in the chat and you could verbally respond, or you could type and respond. I just think that it's important to note that if you're typing, you're going to be focused on typing and you're not going to be talking to multiple people, so it might be a bit confusing or distracting for other participants. So I would recommend verbally replying if you're the host. The next one is, will you verbally answer? It's completely your choice. I would recommend it. I think it allows other participants to feel involved, and often sometimes in a group hearing other people's questions, opinions, queries, even regarding digital work where people might be confused. It's nice to hear other people's questions because you can learn from them, and it doesn't make you feel as silly if maybe you're confused about something. And I think definitely our clinics and our webinars have shown that people are really kind, and it's a safe space to sort of ask any question, because we are literally doing all of this just to help. So moving on, during your group video meeting, how and when will you allow participants to speak? This is really important, and it varies from different types of meeting. I think that if you're delivering a presentation or something like a webinar, mic should be muted. Of course, it's your choice, but I think it minimizes like the audio pollution, and you're going to get a much clearer sound for everybody. And if you're in a large meeting, everyone have your mics muted and maybe raise your hand when you want to speak. But if you're in a smaller meeting, I think it's completely fine to have everyone's mics on, because you're having more of a collaborative chat. But again, it's just an important consideration going into a group meeting. The next one is to consider unmuting a group if it's small. And in the webinar format that we're using, you have attendees and you have panelists, and so the host has the most control. Panelists have as much control as the host allows, and attendees are just there to attend. So a way to get around only the host having control for the webinar, a way to get around only the host having control is to promote people to panelist level. Participants cannot unmute themselves. You have to prompt them and allow them to do this as the host. Important to consider if you're wanting to have a collaborative conversation. Just make sure that you invite people to unmute themselves, and then you can verbally ask them to unmute just in case they haven't seen the direction. So the aftercare of a group meeting. After a group video call, it's important to consider how will you close your meeting. For me personally, we close with a Q&A session. So once I feel like everyone's asked their questions and people have had an opportunity to ask, I'll make a brief statement saying, if you think of any more questions, or if you were maybe embarrassed to ask a question, make sure to email me. I'll be sending out a thank you for attending email, and you can ask me any questions. I'm here to help. That's what I'm doing as the digital support officer. So that, in my opinion, is a great way to end a meeting. Just tell people that they're more than welcome to follow up with any information and resources that they're wishing for. Another consideration that you should make for your group call is a thank you for attending email or message. If there's a meeting, maybe you need to take minutes for the meeting and you'd like to email this out afterwards, or a brief summary, or even just a thank you for attending is a nice way to close a professional meeting or a group meeting. Okay, and do you need a feedback form for your meeting, and how will you obtain this? Again, it depends on the type of meeting you're holding. If you're just having a chat with some friends, you're not going to need a feedback form, but if you're doing something more professional with a larger group, or you're running something like we're doing, we do feedback forms, which is really important, and we'd be really grateful if you filled out our feedback form that we put into our thank you for attending email. We do feedback forms to measure our progress and measure our reach and see if people are happy with the service, and we do this to improve the service. So feedback forms are a great thing to consider if you're looking at sort of running a service. And the last one is sharing relevant resources. So in our thank you for attending email, we include the link to this PowerPoint. We include the link to our YouTube channel, where probably about a week after each of the webinars, we try to upload like an edited webinar so that it's easy to view and people can view the direct recording of the webinar so that they have something that they can play back. It's another good thing to consider how you're going to share the minutes or the recording or PDF resources, that sort of thing. So yeah, there's some good things to consider in your video meeting. I think we'll move on to using Zoom for group meetings. We will also look at Microsoft Teams, and I have listed a few alternatives to Zoom, but we did our alternatives to Zoom in our last bite-size session. So if this is something that you'd like to look at, alternatives for Zoom for your group, I have resources on that, but I'm not going to cover it in depth today. So using Zoom for group meetings and videos. To set up a meeting for other people to join, you will need to create a unique meeting link and ID. The following video demonstrates how to schedule a meeting. On the free Zoom package, you can call from 1 to 100 participants in a meeting. The meeting will also cap at 40 minutes. Of course, if you'd like to talk for longer, you can end the call and start a new call, resetting the 40-minute clock. So it's a little inconvenient, but there are loopholes to it, and that's sort of what we're saying there. Okay, so setting up a Zoom meeting, that was all about pre-scheduling a meeting, and Zoom has a really great tool where you can go in and pre-schedule your meetings. You put in your title, your time, your date, and it creates an invite for you and your unique link. So then you can copy that invite and pop it in an email and send it to whoever it needs. That was just a video doing the detailed explanation of that, but we've got resources we can share on that afterwards. So it's unfortunate that we couldn't show you right now, but I'm sure that we can still make sure that you know how to access and set up a Zoom meeting. So to set up a meeting for other people to join you, you will need to create a unique meeting link and ID. That is what that previous video would have been about. I've just lost my lost where I'm at a little bit, but the bottom of this screen that I'm showing right now is your navigation bar. So this is how you would manage when I was talking about the chat function and the screen share and the recording and the reactions. I'm just going to go through left to right and just do a little bit of an explanation on how to use the features that are easily available to a basic so like the basic package of the Zoom website. So on the left you have your mute button. This is your personal mute button. So if you were to press this, nobody would be able to hear the audio. It's a great tool for when you're setting up. So if you decided to open the Zoom call, you could just mute and you could carry on getting ready. And when you're ready, unmute yourself and introduce yourself, as we sort of explained in the start. So apart from that, if you're the host, you're not going to really need to mute yourself unless other people are talking and you don't want to disrupt the audio. Next to that is the start video button. As the video that we would have played explained, mine shows my name right now because I didn't have a profile picture saved, but if you had a profile picture, it would just show that. So that is actually a really good option just for people to be able to see you but not see you if you didn't want to have your video on. Next along the bottom is the participant counter. So as you can see, it's just got a 1 next to it because this was me just making my own little Zoom call so that I could get an example for you guys. But the amount of participants in the call, the number will go up, so you can see how many people are listening and whether, if you're in the webinar function, whether they're participants or they're panelists. To access the chat that I was talking about, you've got that option next to the participant button. This allows messaging communication, just a type chat in its very basic messaging form. They're not direct messages, they do tend to be whole group messages. They're good for asking questions, or if your mic's not working, you can just pop it in the chat, that sort of thing. If you don't have the Q&A feature, which is part of the webinar, so it's not part of the basic plan, chat's also a good place to ask questions to the host. And if they've established how they'll address them later on, then they can respond audibly, or they can type back, that sort of thing. So the next button on from that is screen share. Screen share is a really useful tool. It's what I'm using right now to share the presentation. So if you're delivering activities with visual stimuli, screen share is a great option, or a presentation. In a meeting, you need to show a document, or how to do something or access something. Screen share is a really useful tool. And I'll go a tiny bit into how to use screen share. Next along from that is the record button that I've mentioned. You press this when you want to record a session. Once you've done your introduction and you've announced that you're now going to begin recording, you can press this button and you can choose whether to save it to your computer or the cloud. Record buttons are great for presentations, or something like we're doing, like a webinar where it's more formal and you'd want to have like a keepsake from the meeting. I know that lots of university lecturers record their sessions so that they can publish them. Just means that people aren't missing out on content. I wouldn't say it's very necessary for the day-to-day meeting though. And the next one along is the reactions that I talk about. So when you click reactions, you have some emojis. You could use it as a reaction, you could use it as feedback, but I would say it's really good for like a digital hands up, like asking to talk or asking to ask a question audibly. So that's just the basic navigation bar that you'll see in Zoom. And I'm pretty sure that text is the exact same thing. The navigation bar is typically along the bottom, unless you're screen sharing, and then the navigation bar is along the top. So screen sharing, just going to try and get that in the middle. Okay, screen sharing, what I would recommend or advise you do if you're planning on screen sharing documents is to have the apps and the documents open and ready to share. So I try and close down all of the tabs, all of the documents, just so that when it comes to accessing what I need, I can do it quite quickly. For every new app or document that you need to share, you have to switch between the screens in the interface that you can see right now. So when you press screen share, it will pop up all the screens that you have open on your computer, and you need to select that one to screen share. And if you want to screen share a different one, you need to exit screen share and select a different tab that's open. So that can be quite confusing because your screen share will not show you scrolling around on your desktop. It's not going to show private information, that sort of stuff, if you've not shared that tab that's open. It's not like it's not a live feed of your laptop. So for chat and questions, you can't see the chat when you're in screen share, which is why we have chat support, and why it was so difficult for me to realize that the audio wasn't working. So what I would recommend for that is having someone like chat support who you can have to monitor if people can hear stuff or if they can see it, and they can try and contact you and make sure that you're not wasting tons of time. Like I possibly could have been playing you all a video with no audio. So that is good advice for if not being able to see the chat whilst you're in screen share mode. Asking people whilst you're in screen share to save their questions for the end is a good idea, as you cannot see the chat, so you can't answer questions. Another thing, when I'm screen sharing, I have a small video panel of me, but when I did my clinics, I had a small video panel of each person in the meeting. This is fine, but it can obstruct your view of what you're looking at if you're looking at a presentation sometimes. If you need to move the video panel, you can just drag and drop the video, the little like live feed videos of everyone, to a different area. So it's important to know that you can just move the video screen. In the toolbar, you can also choose to hide the video panel if that would work better for you as well, rather than constantly having to drag and drop the video all over the screen. So once you've finished the meeting, you can scroll to the end of the navigation bar, which I'll see if I have it up again. Scroll to the end of the navigation bar and there is the end button. When you're the host, you'll get two options. You can end the meeting for all, or you can just leave the meeting. So say you're in a smaller meeting and you leave the meeting, everyone else would be able to carry on chatting for the the end duration of the video call. So just be aware that you can kick everyone out the meeting, or you can just leave the meeting and allow people to chat and further discuss if you have somewhere else to be or you need to go to a different meeting. Okay, so I know we haven't properly done Zoom and how to pre-schedule, but we've looked at some of the features. We're now going to look at how to use Teams for group video meetings. So in Teams, Microsoft Teams, you can go to the calendar meetings button on the left side of the app and click new meeting in the top right hand corner. So if you know Teams, you know that there's a navigation bar down the left hand side. If you go on your calendar, I find that's where it's best to set up a Teams meeting. The scheduling form is where you'll give your meeting a title, invite people and add meeting details. Use the schedule assistant to find a time that works for everyone, so you can see if other people are in meetings at different times. Once you've filled out the details, select save, and this will close the scheduling form and send an invite to everyone's Outlook inbox. That's what I would say is good about Microsoft Teams, is that the invites are automated, so there's not a long process of copying invites into other emails. Okay. So sending out invites. If you're hosting a group meeting, you're going to need to invite people in some format. Sending out invites is easy and can be done in a multitude of ways. I personally tend to send out invites and access details in email format. The key information that you must include in the invite is the meeting link. This is specifically for Zoom. The meeting link, the meeting ID, and the meeting passcode. If you choose to make your meeting passcode protected, you also need to include this passcode in the email, otherwise people aren't going to be able to verify that they've been sent the invite and that they have access to the meeting. You should also include in your email your time, date, topic, etc., because just from a meeting link, people might not know which meeting's on about, especially if they've got lots of meetings booked in. So I'd suggest in your email subject line putting invite to webinar on this date and the title of the webinar, just so it makes it really easy for people to identify what each link is. And like I said, with the Microsoft Teams invite, it's done automatically and people just accept the invite, as Microsoft is linked, is often linked into emails like Outlook and such. They're quite cohesive platforms. Okay, so can you use Zoom and Microsoft Teams on a tablet, computer, or a smartphone? It's different for each of the platforms, but the answer is yes. You can use the video calling on all 3 devices, providing that you have a Zoom app downloaded. However, if you are hosting a group meeting on Zoom, it's easier to manage this from a computer. Or if you're pre-scheduling. So something that I said in our clinics is that you could schedule or pre-schedule the Zoom meeting in an internet browser online, and then when it came to hosting, you could access this via the app because it's all already set up. I think that's a really great way to do it if you would rather use say a tablet or a phone. But generally, if it's a professional, bigger meeting, I'd recommend your computer. And the other is, can you use Microsoft Teams on a computer, phone, and tablet? The answer is yes, but you can only use the video calling feature on a computer or laptop. You can use Teams on any smartphone or tablet, as the app is available on both Android and iOS. But the catch is that the call is audio only, so no video connection. So we're talking about video calling, so computer and laptop again is best, but you can take a call. I just wouldn't do it for a professional meeting. Like if you took just an audio call, maybe it's just like a catch up or something much more informal. So, common problems that occur with Zoom and advice on that. Scroll on from our graphic. Okay, there's lots of common problems with video calling. This is actually, it says Zoom, it suits both Zoom and Microsoft Teams. So a big thing is camera and audio not working. So if you can't hear anyone when you join a meeting, first check your computer volume. It seems silly, but I've had it happen to me where I'm putting in the chat, I can't hear you, like your audio is not very clear, I didn't have my volume high enough, or I didn't have my volume on. So that would be my first port of call. If not, the person that entered the video call, or specifically the Zoom call, might have closed the window that popped up before, asking you to join the meeting with audio. Instead of actually closing that window next time, make sure to press the blue join with computer audio button instead. Although if you're already in the meeting and it's too late to press the join with computer audio, you can select the join audio option at the bottom left corner of the screen during a meeting. So you're looking for a join audio option, which would be nearer the mic. You also have the option to test your mic. So if people are saying they can't hear you, test your mic and your computer will play it back to you, and then you can determine whether the problem's on your end or their end. Another common problem is that the sound quality is poor. This can often happen in group calls if everyone has their mic turned on. To solve this, you can ask all participants to mute their mics when they're not speaking. As I said, if everyone has their mic on, your mics are looking for audio signals, so even if someone rustles something or someone drops something, it's gonna add a lot to the noise pollution of the call. And if there's lots of people on the call, computers can't process it sometimes, and it just comes through as just white noise, and it makes it difficult to hear the speaker. Okay, another potential issue is Zoom bombing. It became unfortunately very common, which is why it coined its own term, Zoom bombing. And it's the act of an unexpected visitor joining in on a meeting and sharing disruptive images or videos or audio, even just them speaking. Zoom have implemented further safety features now to try and make this more difficult. The advice would be, though, to abstain from sharing your Zoom meeting ID publicly on any social media or with people who haven't registered interest in your session. So the way that we do it, we have people register interest and then we send out an invite, and that seems to work really well in terms of security. It's more just not having your meeting ID out there for anyone to join and potentially disrupt your session. Also keep in mind that the host can always remove unexpected visitors from a meeting. To get this job done, click Participants option, so that we saw on the navigation bar, on the taskbar, and hover over a participant's name. You can click More, or it might be 3 dots next to their name, and you can click Remove. If all else fails, you can close the meeting and start up a more secure meeting by emailing out an instant Zoom meeting link. There's ways around it. It is unfortunate if it happens, but don't let it bother you too much, as Zoom is trying their best to make this less common. It's more common in big university lectures or bigger meetings where it has more of a public access than small company meetings or group activity meetings. So the other potential issues, mainly potential issues lie with interference. It's the benefit of keeping everyone muted that stops your audio interference. Participants not being able to hear you. Again, you can test your mic, see if it's a problem on your end or their end, and just try your best to troubleshoot what's going on. If all else fails, you can ask someone to leave a meeting and rejoin. Just try a few things, and if not, well, I'll get on to if not. Audio settings may not properly load, which is, again, you need to test your mics, and if all else fails, exit and rejoin a meeting. If a participant's computer or device has blocked access to speaker, camera, or microphone, like I'm sure you're aware, when you download an app on your phone, it asks you for access to your microphone, video, camera. It's best to go into your settings and check that you've allowed access for all of these on any of your phone, tablet, computer. You can encourage people to restart their computer and laptop if their audio settings don't kick in, and they may need to check their browser settings or their settings in their Zoom app on their smart device. So that's an idea of like troubleshooting what's going on. And if all else fails, they've exited and rejoined, you just need to apologize and suggest a backup solution if not resolved. So like our video wouldn't play today, this is a resource that we can distribute and we can make sure that you have access to. And other examples of this would be access to the resources like the link to this Spark page presentation, or link to the recording or video that you upload to YouTube, or any alternative that the participant can access so they feel like they've not lost out. So some alternatives that I said, I can share these resources if you ask me to email you, but other methods of video calling that are free. Zoom, Microsoft Teams, we both covered. WhatsApp video call, FaceTime, and Facebook Messenger all have video call services. So there's some alternatives that to look into if you're looking to not use Zoom, because Zoom can be quite an intimidating platform. It shouldn't be, it's super, super simple, but it can be, and I can understand why people might not want to use it. So I'm running a bit over time, but the basic do's and don'ts: try not to delay start time, do try and have a trial run with somebody else, maybe join the Zoom meeting a little bit earlier and have a check through all of your navigation bar. Don't allow your camera positioning to become a distraction for other participants in your video. Don't forget that appearances matter in video meetings. Although it's nice to be comfy at home, do try and put some effort in so that you look presentable, especially if you're the host. You're supposed to be in charge and managing the meeting. So don't rock up in your pajamas would be my advice. Do make sure you're well lit and visible when your camera turns on. If you can, get in front of a window. It's not easy for everybody if you're not using a laptop, if you're stuck to where your monitor is, but try not to have a window behind you, because that's going to cast a shadow forwards and it's going to be really difficult to see you. Don't multitask during video meetings. As much as you think that it's not obvious, it is quite easy to tell when someone's multitasking, especially if you're the host. You're only going to distract your train of thought and sort of go off topic, and it's just not going to come across as well to participants that are watching you. So that's brief do's and don'ts. We have time for the Q&A. We have 10 minutes, well, 10-15 minutes. If you have any questions, thank you very much for attending. Pop any questions in the Q&A panel and I can have a look through them. I'm going to stop sharing my screen now and stop recording so that we can come back to the chat.